The rain had started just before sunrise. Cold drops tapped against the windows of the Riverside Diner as customers shuffled inside, shaking water from their jackets and ordering hot coffee. Near the entrance sat a man nobody paid much attention to. His beard was gray. His boots were worn. His old military duffel bag rested beside his chair. Most people assumed he was homeless. Some looked away. Others stared. The man simply sat quietly and warmed his hands around a cup of coffee. His name was Daniel Walker. Not yet. Across the room, the owner of the diner, Frank Morrison, watched him with growing irritation. Frank had spent years building a reputation as one of the most successful businessmen in town. He owned several restaurants, several properties. To Frank, appearances meant everything, and Daniel didn't fit the image he wanted for his establishment. He walked across the diner. The conversations slowly faded. People sensed something was about to happen. Frank stopped beside Daniel's table. "You've been sitting here long enough." Daniel looked up calmly. "I bought coffee." Frank folded his arms. "One coffee doesn't buy you a whole morning." A few customers chuckled. Daniel remained quiet. Frank leaned closer. The room grew uncomfortable. Daniel glanced around. Everyone was watching. Still, he said nothing. That only seemed to irritate Frank more. Then came the words that changed everything. "You veterans always want special treatment." Several people laughed. Others looked away. Daniel slowly stood. Not because he was angry, because he had heard enough. He picked up his duffel bag, placed a few dollars on the table, and headed toward the door. The humiliation was complete. At least that's what everyone thought. What nobody realized was that Daniel Walker had once commanded one of the most dangerous classified rescue missions in military history. And within a few hours, the entire town would learn his name. Outside, the rain continued falling. Daniel walked down Main Street toward the old bus station. He had nowhere permanent to stay. Life after the military had not been easy. Years earlier, he had returned home carrying wounds nobody could see. The mission that made him a hero had also cost him nearly everything. His closest friends, his career, his peace of mind. For years, he drifted from place to place, working odd jobs, sleeping wherever he could, trying to forget things he could never truly escape. Most people saw an old man carrying a duffel bag. They never saw the sacrifices, the memories, the nightmares, the courage. And that was exactly how Daniel preferred it. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Frank proudly retold the story. Each version made him look tougher, more important, more successful. Customers laughed. Employees smiled nervously. But one waitress didn't. Her name was Emily. She had watched the entire exchange. And something about Daniel bothered her. Not because he looked dangerous, because he looked familiar. She couldn't explain why, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. 3 hours later, everything changed. A convoy of black SUVs rolled into town. People stopped walking. Store owners stepped outside. Traffic slowed. The vehicles moved with military precision. One after another. 6 black SUVs. Dark windows. Government plates. The convoy stopped directly in front of the Riverside Diner. Silence fell across Main Street. Doors opened. Uniformed officers stepped out. Then more. And more. The atmosphere changed instantly. Nobody knew what was happening. Frank stepped outside. His confidence suddenly gone. Then the final vehicle door opened. A 4-star general emerged. Every conversation stopped. The town had never seen anything like it. The general adjusted his cap and surveyed the area. Beside him stood several high-ranking officers. One of them carried a sealed presentation case. Another held official documents. The general approached Frank. "Are you the owner?" Frank nodded nervously. "Yes, sir." The general's next question sent a chill through everyone nearby. "Where is Sergeant First Class Daniel Walker?" Frank blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" The general's face hardened. "Daniel Walker." The crowd exchanged confused looks. Then realization spread. The homeless veteran. The man from the diner. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Frank swallowed hard. "I think he left." The general stared at him. "You let him leave?" Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then the general looked around. "Find him." Immediately, officers spread throughout town. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was Daniel Walker? The answer began emerging within hours. News crews arrived. Military personnel coordinated searches. Old records surfaced. And pieces of a forgotten story began connecting. 23 years earlier, a military transport aircraft carrying more than 100 personnel had crashed deep inside hostile territory during a classified operation. Rescue attempts failed. Communications were lost. The situation became desperate. Officials feared everyone on board would die. Then a young Sergeant Daniel Walker volunteered for an impossible mission. A mission many believed was suicide. His team entered enemy-controlled territory. No support. No backup. No guarantees. For 72 hours they fought impossible odds. Navigating mountains. Avoiding patrols. Protecting survivors. Carrying wounded personnel through conditions few could survive. When the mission finally ended, 112 lives had been saved. 112. The operation remained classified. The public never learned about it. Neither did most military personnel. Daniel received almost no recognition. And eventually the story disappeared. Until now. Because recently, the operation had been officially declassified. And investigators reviewing the mission discovered something shocking. The highest military honor recommendation had never been processed. The paperwork vanished decades earlier, lost during administrative restructuring. A bureaucratic mistake had buried one of the greatest acts of courage in modern military history. The military spent months searching for Daniel, but nobody knew where he was, until a retired officer recognized him in a social media photo taken outside the diner. And that was why the convoy had arrived. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone near the old train depot at the edge of town, watching freight cars roll past, completely unaware of the storm unfolding around him. Then he heard engines. Lots of engines. The convoy approached slowly. Daniel sighed. He assumed someone wanted him to move. Again. Instead, the vehicle stopped. Doors opened. Military officers stepped out. Then the 4-star general approached. The old veteran immediately stood. Years of discipline never disappear. The general stopped a few feet away and saluted. A perfect military salute. Daniel froze. The entire town watched from a distance. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. The highest-ranking officer present was saluting the homeless veteran. Daniel slowly returned the salute. The general's voice carried through the silent crowd. Sergeant First Class Daniel Walker. For 23 years this nation failed to properly thank you. Daniel looked confused. The general continued. But that mistake ends today. The presentation case opened. Gasps spread through the crowd. Inside rested one of the nation's highest military decorations. Many people had only seen it on television. Some had never seen one at all. Daniel stared at it silently. The general's voice cracked slightly. 112 service members are alive because of your actions. Generations exist because of what you did. You carried wounded soldiers through enemy territory while refusing evacuation yourself. You saved lives until your body physically collapsed. And then you disappeared without asking for recognition. The crowd stood frozen. Many were crying, including people who had laughed at him earlier. But the story wasn't finished. Because standing behind the crowd were dozens of vehicles. Men and women slowly stepped forward. Some walked with canes. Others wore military jackets. A few carried photographs. Daniel looked closer. And survivors. The people he had saved. Many had spent years searching for him. One by one they approached, shaking his hand, hugging him, thanking him. Some couldn't even speak through their tears. One elderly man finally managed a sentence. You carried me for 10 miles. I never got the chance to thank you. Daniel lowered his head, emotion overwhelming him. The town watched in complete silence. Even Frank. Especially Frank. The diner owner now understood exactly what he had done. Hours earlier, he had humiliated a national hero. Publicly. In front of everyone. Now everyone was watching him. The shame was unbearable. Eventually Frank stepped forward, his voice shaking. I owe you an apology. Daniel looked at him quietly. Frank struggled to continue. What I said was wrong. I judged you. I thought I knew who you were. The crowd waited. Daniel studied him for a moment, then offered a small smile. It's all right. 3 simple words. No anger. No revenge. No humiliation. And somehow that made the moment even more powerful. Because Daniel didn't need revenge. The truth had already done the work. The town's perception changed overnight. News coverage spread nationally. Interviews followed. Schools invited Daniel to speak. Veterans organizations honored him. People who once ignored him now stood in line just to shake his hand. But Daniel remained exactly the same. Quiet, humble, respectful. Months later, a permanent home was arranged through veteran support organizations. The survivors he had saved stayed in contact. Many became close friends. And for the first time in decades, Daniel no longer felt forgotten. One evening he returned to the same diner. The same booth. The same view through the window. Only this time the atmosphere was different. People recognized him. But nobody treated him like a celebrity. They treated him with respect. Frank personally served his coffee. No speeches. No cameras. No attention. Just respect. The kind Daniel valued most. As the sun set over the town, golden light filled the diner. Daniel looked outside, watching people walk along Main Street, living ordinary lives. Then he smiled, not because he had finally been recognized, but because the people he saved had lived long enough to build families, careers, and futures. That was always the reward that mattered. And sometimes, the strongest people in the room are the ones nobody notices, until the truth finally arrives. And when it does, the entire world sees them differently. The end.